Welcome to yet another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 494. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, the usual cast of characters: Gail from Gail Falkenthal Unboxing and NY Fights, Daniel from 4 Boxing News, and the Indescribable. What's going on, lady and gent?
It was a long boxing weekend, wasn't it? Especially if
Man, was it?
Friday night and Saturday morning and Saturday evening, very late for some of you. And don't forget that we had Sunday night boxing. So, kind of like the old days, where it was 4 or 5 days a week.
Round the clock fights, that's for sure. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, podcast, etc. To talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, it will get discussed. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. If you wish to email us, got a new email account because the old one, some problems with it. But if you wish to email us with any comments, questions, etc., you can do so. PND Boxing Report. Let me repeat that. PND Boxing Report at gmail.com. So if anybody's been having problems reaching out to us, I just went ahead and set up a different account and had the other one closed out. And then repeat that for those who wish to email us. PND Boxing Report at gmail.com. If you check the description for those who are checking us out on YouTube, you will see where you can find Pound for Pound Box Report all over various social media platforms, links to the Facebook page, links to the Twitter page, links to where to find the YouTube channel. As I've said on previous episodes, Pound for Pound Box Report now has an affiliates for those who are into fragrance, into colognes, perfumes, overall body care products. Pound for Pound Box Report has affiliates with Nivrad, Nivrad, as well as Nazar Fragrances, as well as Harmony Perfumes, Harmony spelled with an X. If you use the code, as you see here, MICHAELW P4P, you get 15% off on all products from Nivrad and Nazar Fragrances. If you use the code Mike15, MIKE15, you'll get 15% off on all fragrances over at Harmony Perfumes. Last but certainly not least, if you again check the description for those who are watching this on YouTube, got Cash Me and PayPal donation links. Let donation be the best nation. Wouldn't matter to us if it's $1, $2, $5, whatever contribution we will be grateful for. If you're checking us out on YouTube, also make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That way you'll get notifications on new episodes as well as shorts that usually drop within a day or so after the live recording. Let's get started. As usual, going with ladies first. And let's, again, a lot of fights. And because of that, I'm going to go and have an individual, either Gail, Daniel, or myself, talk about these fights. Let's start over in Thailand. No television coverage of this, just really extended clips. But Tyson Fury returning to the ring to fight Mariusz, Wach. I was able to see clips of this Gail. Fury won by 7th round stoppage. This was a sparring session. Wach was Bob Hope's cousin, the equivalent of Bob Hope's cousin. No Hope, 46 years old, fought like it, right? And there's a kind of a theme here, and that's why I named this particular episode the way that I did. Fury did what he had to do, setting up a potential future big fight. We'll talk about that in a few. But how well did he look? He didn't look that great at all. Probably wasn't motivated to, but still. I don't think that Fury is the fighter that he once was, even though this was nothing more. This was just easy work, and everybody knew what was going to happen here.
Yeah, everybody knew it was going to happen. So a lot of people have been curious. What the hell? Why wasn't there any broadcast? You know, what was Fury hiding? What's going on? Well, the reason is that Netflix owned all the rights to that fight. It was staged primarily as part of Tyson Fury's Netflix reality TV show At Home with the Furies, Season 3, which is going to be aired just before the anticipated Joshua versus Fury fight on Netflix. That's why there was no broadcast coverage by any of the normal boxing channels, no domestic coverage in Thailand, nothing. Now, I was interested to see how many YouTube channels posted substantial portions of the fight. So if you are curious, they are out there to see. Listen, Mariusz Wach is a very well known sparring partner for a lot of these heavyweights because he is a big, durable guy. You know, he gives an honest effort. He's always willing to step up when somebody needs sparring from somebody who's, 6'5" and big and Polish, right? He is also, however, an active fighter, even at age 46. He fought 3 times in the last 12 months. So this is the guy I kind of think of as a lunch pail type fighter, right? He just packs a lunch, goes, does his thing, gives guys rounds, earns his paycheck, moves on. We all knew what was going to happen. How did they look? They both looked like they were at a sparring session, as you said. They moved around, they did their thing. Fury eventually did warm up a bit after 3 or 4 rounds, which was precisely the point, in addition to generating some content for Netflix to work with for the reality show. And once Falk had pretty much earned that paycheck, whatever he was getting paid, his corner retired him after the 7th round. Neither guy was terribly hurt. They did land shots, and a heavyweight punch is still a heavyweight punch. Even if you're 46, even if you're Tyson Fury, who's still a little bit rusty. Both Fury and Joshua, as we'll talk about later in the show, really insisted on tune-up fights. Joshua truly needed his. Fury, a little less, but often the point of tune-up fights is to get the public's appetite whetted for the real fight to come. Although you couldn't see Tyson Fury's fight live, when it gets a worldwide audience on Netflix, it's going to be seen by so many more people than any stream or DAZN broadcast from Thailand would have in the early part of Friday in the morning. So mission accomplished there.
And as you alluded to, set up fight here for Fury. It's anticipated he's going to fight Anthony Joshua, who fought the next day over in Saudi Arabia. And I go to you, Daniel. Joshua won, but there's a lot more questions in the aftermath that we had even heading in, right? We know the story of AJ coming off of the sad events over in Australia, not Australia, excuse me, in Nigeria late last year, where he was in a car accident. 2 of his best friends passed away, right? So there was there was emotional aspect for Joshua, just as much physical heading into this fight. But when you look at his win, 2nd round stoppage, knockout over Kristian Prenga, all the questions it was about physical with Joshua, namely his punch resistance. 20 seconds in, Joshua was put on the deck. Prenga had him wobbly and on shaky legs all throughout that 1st round, right? 2nd round, Prenga's inexperience came into play. He should have went for the finish. Instead, he got conservative. He let Joshua find his legs a bit. And once he did that, game, set, match. Final 30 seconds of the round 2, Joshua poured on the punches, poured on the power, knocked Prenga out. Joshua gets the win, sets up the fight with Fury later on this year. But all the talk afterwards is that Joshua cannot take a solid punch anymore. Do you agree?
Yeah, that was the main thing with it, because we've seen, like I said, we've seen Klitschko taken down. We've seen Andy Ruiz taken down. We're trying to see in this case, okay, first, is he going to be able to finish his opponent relatively quick, which he technically did. But that 1st round, I think you could feel every one of the matchmakers, everybody that was lining things up to just be scared. Flat out scared because they were watching pretty much the British version of Maypac starting to go up in smoke. And this genuinely worries me too. Now when I look at Joshua, because like I said, Prenga he was picked specifically to be a cherry pick. Now, granted, this is the issue a lot of times. When you cherry pick too much, sometimes you fall a little bit short of expectations, and you ultimately wind up with an upset. Didn't happen in this case, but it showed that unfortunately Joshua's chin looks a lot softer probably now than it was a few years ago. Now, could it just be rust? Could it just be like he still has, like I said, the memory of his friends still in his head? It could be that. Or it could be that he's been in the boxing world for almost a decade and a half. And he's taken a pretty decent amount of punishment in that time. And maybe that's already starting to catch up to him. Now, look, the job was done. He got that second round knockout. He was able to make it a short night. But, yeah, there's a lot more questions they have answers. And between that and Fury's performance like I said, I did see parts of it, highlights of it, and it just looked bad. It was a weekend for both of these guys to show that they were not only still the goods, but were worthy of the hype of pretty much this being the British Maypac in the best sense. But instead, both of them came out looking like this is going to be the British Maypac in the worst sense.
I mean, will the fight sell? Yes, still, because they're two big names, big figures. They still put butts in seats, and they are still cash cows. Unfortunately, to Daniel's point, Joshua is looking like a shell of himself, and Fury looks like he's a fighter who has slowed down. So, yeah, Maypac in the worst sense. That is the trend as far as I see it. On the undercard here, Gail, and I'm talking the undercard of Joshua Prenga. We talked a lot about Hamazah Sheeraz and the potential that he has, right, as a fighter. Coming up, moving up to 68, destroying Berlanga in the fight following that, winning in the world title. Well, Sheeraz made the first defense of that WBO super middleweight belt against a fighter by the name of Simon Zachenhuber, and I just have to say it. I was high-key disappointed in that. I had to cover this entire card for 3kingsboxing.com. Shout out to everybody at 3kingsboxing.com. 2K, the head of 3 Kings, Bo, singing writer, Bakari, singing writer, all the contributors behind the scenes, right? Sheeraz, he never got out of first gear. Where was the spark? Where was the pepper that we saw, particularly in his win over Berlanga? He gave Zachenhuber false hope. You see how Zachenhuber seemingly was happy in there, spry, eager as the fight went on, gaining confidence. If Sheeraz was the fighter that we saw in his previous bouts, he should have stopped this dude. And yet he seemed comfortable to coast, comfortable just to get the decision. I don't understand it. You cannot say that you want unification. You cannot say that you want a fight even against an aged Canelo and then put it on that kind of performance. Everybody is allowed to have an off night, but that was more than just an off night. That was a big disappointment for me.
Tell you what, it reminded me a bit of his fight where he narrowly escaped a loss, should have taken a loss against Carlos Adames. after the fight with Simon on Saturday, for which he only won a majority decision. The third card was a draw, ladies and gentlemen. German gave a damn good account of himself. Sheeraz's only explanation was that, he doesn't get motivated unless he's standing in front of top talent. Well, okay, that does happen with certain fighters, but then let's think a little harder about where he looked a little bit pedestrian against a world champion. So what is this saying about him? I am so perplexed by this. When he first came to the boxing world's attention outside of Great Britain, I was impressed and very enthusiastic about him. I've interviewed him. He's a terrific guy. He does seem to train hard. He does all the right things. He doesn't act up outside the ring. But this fight was absolutely painful to watch. It was just flat out terrible.
And snoozer.
This is not the kind of fight you want to present to the public. Particularly, let us also remind ourselves, this was a pay-per-view card. And this was one of the main fights on the card. And somebody spending $80 in the United States and 20 pounds in Great Britain getting handed this lineup, everybody should band together and file a class action lawsuit. It was that bad. Now, I have to admit, when I did my preview article, I was very candid with the readers saying, are you really sure you want to spend that kind of money? If you're a hardcore, you've got DAZN Ultimate, it came with it, okay? That's partially why you cough up that money, because occasionally there is an absolute stinker like this where you just put a match to your money if you paid it. And we all knew we were going to see the highlights at the very least from the main event, which is what everyone wanted to see. Out of curiosity, of course, because of the road Joshua's traveled over the last 10, 12 months. We didn't know ahead of time that we'd be paying that $80, to see everything versus the person who decided, you know what, I'm good, I'll wait for the highlights. And the highlights pretty much show the whole damn fight. So you were counting on getting your complete value from the undercard, which started at 10 o'clock on the East Coast, 8 o'clock on the West Coast or something. It, ground on all day. There were a few good undercard performances, but they were not $80 pay-per-view undercard performances. And this is the one we should have counted on to see Sheeraz at his best, and we absolutely did not. And if I'm anybody else at 168, looking at this guy who holds one of the belts, I'm all over him. I am calling my manager saying, my promoter saying, get me that fight right now.
Listen. There's a fighter by the name of Bank who fought on the undercard here, deep on the undercard. Ranked second, I believe, by the WBO. The performance that Bank put on in a stoppage win would have beat this version of Sheeraz. I can give Sheeraz an out somewhat for the Artemis bout, right, Gail? And I'm following up for a reason, because at least there's an argument, and I've heard that that Sheeraz was struggling to make 160, and I can get it, right? 6'3", 6'4", string bean, right? At 168, he should have been stronger. He should have been more sprite. He should have been energetic, but we didn't see it. The follow-up question is, as disappointed as I was in the fighter, are you equally baffled by the cornerman of Andy Lee, who seemed to me to be a little bit too cool for school in there? He should have had a sense of urgency as well. Like, okay, you fighting in front of a lot of people here. It's anticipated that I need for you to step up the level here. I never really heard that from Lee. So is the corner of Lee just as much to blame for the performance in some regards as the fighter himself.
Absolutely not. The corner cannot fight the fight for the fighter. The
I'm
corner
talking
can.
about motivating him. I didn't see a lack of motivation from Lee,
I
even
don't.
throughout the 12
So
rounds.
I'm gonna argue in Lee's favor. Lee knows his fighters. Lee has been in the ring, unlike a lot of trainers, and he's enormously insightful and smart. A lot of trainers who know their fighters know whether getting in their face or hollering at them is going to make them perform or not. And clearly Sheeraz falls in the not category. Andy Lee probably made the call in his mind. Listen, Hamza doesn't have it today. He's not motivated. What I don't want him to do is do anything stupid because his head is not in this fight that possibly would get him cut, get him injured. I'm going to let him cruise to a win. It was a little close for comfort with that, especially with that third card. The other two cards were 115, 113, and 116, 112. And yeah, you know, they took his performance a little bit for granted. But I think that Andy Lee saw that was just going to go how it's going to go. Also, occasionally a trainer will decide, I am not going to upbraid my fighter in the ring because everybody's listening in on the broadcast. And I'm not going to do him dirty like that. Trainers frequently provide cover for their fighter when they're not performing, whether it's pulling them out of the ring, whether it's not embarrassing them. I think that's exactly what was going on with Andy Lee. I mean, this is just how it was going to go. Yeah, and so you've got Jacob Bank out there, undefeated from Denmark. He's 20-0. His fight early on the undercard, I mean, it wasn't spectacular, but it was very skilled. He won his fight with a complete shutout on all three cards, 80-72. And the reason that he has gotten himself into this position, he has the WBO global title that he won by, wait for it, knocking out William Skull, something Canelo Alvarez couldn't do early this year. And then he also won his WBC eliminator. So he is positioning himself to become a mandatory, which somebody from a small country like this who's got no notoriety, that's the only way he's going to get himself positioned for a fight, which is exactly how William Skull kept getting all these fights. So how smart for Bank and his team to maneuver himself to beat Skull, beat his WBC eliminator opponent, and then get that unanimous decision on the undercard. Speaks English well, very personable. You know, he's going to win himself an opportunity here. All the belts are in play in this division, and everyone's going to need to sort themselves out. So the chances will be there for him. And Sheeraz certainly opened the door.
Well, he will get that opportunity. They're both managed by the same guy, and they didn't have them doing a face-off in the middle of the ring afterwards. If if there wasn't already an idea that Bank was going to fight Sheeraz next, and even Sheeraz in pre-fight interviews hinted strongly that Bank would be next. Lucky for him, this fight with this recent fight was not in a more neutral location given the scores, because if the scores was this close in Saudi Arabia, if it was even a more neutral spot,
well, that's of
same.
course, that was exactly the discussion after the Adames fight, right? Sheeraz is a favorite of Turki Al-Sheikh. There's just no secret about that. So he will carry on until somebody definitively beats him, either an absolute, no question, win most of the rounds decision or gets him knocked out. We'll see. I mean, the other theory you can float is that Sheeraz, knowing he'd probably face Bank, didn't want to tip his hand in this fight and decided he would do only what was necessary to win. there are fighters and teams who think like that, and it's just pretty damn stupid.
Indeed. Let's move on to the other fights here. Also on the undercard of Joshua Prenga, Daniel, you had Josh Kelly would turn into a mandatory title defense against a black Irishman by the name of Agyarko, right? Early rounds, it looked like Kelly was going to be in control, but one, Agyarko uh, stepped up his intensity, fought with more pace. More importantly, Kelly started to cut up around his eyes, back cut around his nose. That did not make him look good from an aesthetic standpoint. He ends up getting the win, uh, um, Kelly, right? But the talk of him fighting Boots, it's still happening. But given the facial damage, I don't know. That cut across the nose, that's a serious issue as far as I'm concerned. The team of Kelly, Hearn, and whatnot saying they basically came away clean, quote unquote. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. You don't get cut up like that, suffer that kind of facial damage, and think that you can come back and fight Boots in December, and it's what, late July, early late July. This is being recorded on July the 27th. Will he? Could he fight Boots ultimately? Yeah, but I'm not betting on it happening towards the end of this year. If they fight, it's going to be at some point 2027, first quarter 2027. I would guess.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the case, but smiling at that, Virgil. Virgil takes a smiling at that because that opens an avenue for him to fight Boots. But when it comes to this fight, it's fair to say for a lot of people to say like Josh Kelly's like UK version of Miguel Vasquez. Technically sound. He knows how to fight, but the style is just very, very to beholden to the eye of the beholder. So that's unfortunately what you got in this fight. Like Josh Kelly did what he needed to do, even with a point deduction for hitting his opponent in the back of the head. He did what he was supposed to do as far as winning the fight, but it did not look good. And that cut.
I push back against your question. Excuse me for interrupting. When has Miguel Vasquez bit down in the way that Kelly did when he won the title against Murtazaliev?
That's what I mean. Like that's the main thing is mainly with this aesthetically the styles compared to what you want to see to the fights in the area. Like I said, technically sound, but they still have issues. They still have, unfortunately, some issues as far as trying to get people out. True, Vasquez never had to do that. But Vasquez also was a fighter that a lot of people didn't want to see. And Josh Kelly started to get to that point. But he still did what he was supposed to do. Now, the main issue that's going to come up when it comes to is that cut. That cut looked pretty deep. And we know everyone knows like when it comes to stitching and tissue healing, not only enough just to take off stitches, but healed up enough where if you do try to fight in December, you got to start your training. You got to start your training camp at the latest mid-September. That doesn't give a lot of time. That's barely a month. That's barely a little bit more than a month from what you're facing now. That's what should be worried more in that area. But he did what he was supposed to do. Like I said, Josh Kelly did what he was supposed to do. He did do a little flash and pizzazz during the fight, but between that point deduction and how close the scorecards were, even though he did win, it's going to leave a lot more questions than answers compared when it comes to a fight with boots.
I mean, no one's going to look at that performance for Kelly and thinks he has a chance against Boots. Um, um, or in a fight, a possible potential fight against a Fandora, right? Um, Hell, Zayas may beat that version of what we saw from Kelly over the weekend. So um, wait and see in terms of what's next for Kelly. Will he get that fight with Boots? And if he does win, move on from Saudi Arabia to Australia, Gail. And I mean, look, Errol Spence made the return after what, almost 3 year layoff now to fight Tszyu. Um, Sadness is what I get in the aftermath. Yes, he lost the decision to to Tszyu. Tszyu was just too big, too strong. Uh, the ring rust, the activity, Spence just didn't have the pepper. He doesn't have the pepper anymore. And credit to him, he recognized it. He realized it after the fight, announcing his retirement. So it's kind of dual here with me. You want to give a salute. You want to credit Tszyu for what he had to, doing what he had to do, right? But you also want to give a salute and congratulations to Spence. Um, what ultimately has been a fantastic borderline Hall of Fame career. He gave it one last try, but when you don't have it, you don't have it. And just Spence, he doesn't have it anymore. And at least he has the sense enough to say, I don't have it. Apparently he's okay financially. And that's all that you really want when you see a age fighter um, at the end of his career.
You know, Errol Spence 3 years ago took an absolute beating from Terrence Crawford in a fight that a whole lot of people thought was going to be 50-50 at the least, and many of them favored Spence. So it was a shock for a lot of folks, not the least of which was Spence, who really took it. But we have to remember those years prior to facing Crawford. Spence had some very tough fights in the ring, but he had a lot of tough episodes outside the ring. The car accidents, the admission that he once had a problem with alcohol, which fueled some of those car accidents. The truth is, and no pun intended there, but the truth about the truth is he's lucky to be alive in many ways, and very fortunate to have done well for himself, performed well in many of those fights against champions, would-be and former champions, to have a wonderful family around him, to have invested very well, as he said in one of his interviews, that his finances are set, that his money is working for him. That's what you want to hear from a fighter. And, you have to, in large part, credit Spence's team for getting him there. His manager, Adrian Clark, who I know very well, Clark pounds it into his clients' heads about being financially secure, about not wasting your money on cars and jewelry, but buying property, investing it so that your kids are taken care of, you're taken care of, that you never feel like you've got to fight for money at risk to your long-term health. So Spence did not need to come back, and it sounds like he just didn't have the fire for a long time. He'd get in the gym, just not the motivation to train and get himself back in shape wasn't there until recently, and it did. And I don't blame him for having questions about whether he still had it and whether he could erase that horrible bad taste that ended what we thought might have ended his career because he never formally retired. So I don't blame him for giving it a shot because now he can move forward with the rest of his life having answered those questions. They will not eat at him. They will not wake him up in the middle of the night when he wonders, wow, could I, woulda, shoulda. He got there. And while he didn't look great, I'm not sure what anyone expected to see 3 years away from the ring after a very tough fight and a lot of very tough episodes. He he admitted, first of all, he was really sore after the fight, in a way that he didn't ever experience really before. That's age. I mean, that is nothing more than age. And anyone out there listening north of 40, you know what I'm talking about, right? So good for him. He gave it a shot. It was a shame for me, though, to see that, he's had a pretty serious falling out with his longtime trainer, Derek James. But Ronnie Shields was there for him, took him on, did his best with him. Really made it obvious that Spence just didn't have the tools anymore. It was his legs. His legs were stiff. His footwork was awful. His balance was worse. And the legs, everything starts from the ground up. Your punching power starts from planting your feet, right? He couldn't do it. It also rendered him not able to move very well. The one thing that saved Spence from taking a beating is that he was standing in front of an opponent who isn't quite as washed as he is, but certainly isn't at the peak of his career. Tszyu has been, like a speeding bullet through his career. At one point, he looked like a world beater, and next thing we know, he's having the crap kicked out of him by Bakram Murtazaliev. I mean, a horrible, horrible loss. His losses to Fundora were, both admirable efforts, although he still lost. But moving up to 160, seemed to suit him. He got through it. Was it an enjoyable fight to watch? Unless you're a real hardcore Tszyu fan, it wasn't as bad as Hamazah Sheeraz, but it was just slightly better than watching paint dry.
Share some couple of comments again from Compliance, who's joined us. I appreciate you for checking us out this evening. He says that come on. Basically says shout out to his fellow Dallas native Errol Spence. He also says that Tszyu said he might want Laura next. I got Laura after seeing him go 12 rounds versus that version of Spence. Here's the thing with that Compliance. Number one, if I heard him say that, and if Laura has any legs left, 41-year-old Laura, he outboxes Tszyu, right? And as I was watching the fight, right, I'm saying to myself, the Spence that won the welterweight title against Kell Brook, the Spence that outboxed and outfought Mikey Garcia, that took it to Sean, that fought Porter, that fought Danny Garcia, right? The Spence of, say, 2017 when he beat Brook up to the Garcia fight. He handles that version of Tszyu with ease. And so that's, to me, that spoke to what Spence doesn't have anymore. And to your point, Gail, Tszyu, okay, this shows why Charlo should have fought Tszyu when Tszyu was his mandatory, because Charlo would have outboxed him fairly easily, and Tszyu hadn't been the same since getting destroyed by Murtazaliev and subsequently getting beat up by Fundora a few fights back. Doesn't matter to me at 54 or at 60. I just don't see Tszyu winning a world title. Good fighter, decent fighter, but is he world championship level? Absolutely not. Let's move on to some more fights that took place uh, um, last night, right? Um, no, before that, Saturday night, Demetrius Andrade. I'll just leave it up to whoever saw it. Scored a first round stoppage win of a fighter by the name of Alaide or Alad, however you pronounce it. The return of Boo Boo. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that was it was what it was supposed to have done mainly. Like Boo Boo's is coming off almost a 3+ year layoff. And when it comes to that type of layoff, you have to see whether your skills are there. Now, this is a little bit to his detriment because we have to see first if he was able to take in the rounds. A first round knockout doesn't do that, but it does show probably that the power is still there. And remember, he's a 160, 168. He can still make the weight, which is a good thing if you're going to stick around. And let's be blunt. After that performance by Sheeraz, like we mentioned, like Boo Boo's managers should be calling immediately saying they want that fight. Because that's how bad it was when it comes that Sheeraz performance. That this version of Boo Boo could probably beat him fairly easily. But again, it's a 3-year layoff. We don't really know how much he really has. Probably want to have at least 2 more fights before we actually make the judgment. But hey, at least Boo Boo got to show out technically his home crowd.
Indeed. Now let's go to last night's in New York City, right? Zuffa card. Edgar Berlanga was on the undercard. We'll talk about that in a bit. I want to focus on the main of Edgar Berlanga was the main event. Excuse me. We'll talk about that in a second. But I want to go to the undercard here, Gail. Last week we talked about Richardson, Hitchins, right? Fighting Ricardo Salas. Okay, it's good that he got in the ring. The question is, does it really matter, even if he won, given the way that things transpired that ultimately led up to him giving away the junior welterweight title? Solid, looked excellent in the win against Salas, did Hitchins, but still, I'm like, okay, he won. So what? It doesn't really matter. It's just a win, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, Hitchins is one of these fighters who's very skilled. There's no question about that. He fights with excellent hand speed. He's got a absolutely terrific jab. He's efficient. He wastes nothing in the ring, and takes care of his business. What boxers like Hitchins, who will argue that boxing is the sweet science of hitting and not getting hit. Yes, that is true. Nobody needs to lead forward with their face. On the other hand, boxing is an entertainment choice for the fans. And they choose to watch boxing because they enjoy it as entertainment versus their other choices. If the fights aren't entertaining in some way, they're going to go find something else. They're going to go watch wrestling during different times of the year. Zuffa is going to start competing with the NFL, with some college football games. For God's sakes, they were competing with Big Brother on their linear network at CBS, right? There are people who will watch a few rounds of Richardson Hitchins and go, okay, and they go find something else to do. That's not what Zuffa Boxing, Dana White, and his Saudi financiers want. And the way I put it, which generated, to my surprise, a lot of discussion on boxing Twitter, is that, Hitchins is kind of like a plate of broccoli, right? I like broccoli. I eat broccoli all the time. It's good for you. But broccoli often by itself is just not enough. You want to load it up with some tasty dressing or bury it in a big plate of pasta with your favorite sauce, and then it's great. And Hitchins needs a little something to make his fights and his fighting more tasty. He's got to figure out what that is. Well, he attempted to do a little bit after the fight by calling out all the big names. Well, hold on a second. You signed with Zuffa Boxing. Do you remember you signed with Zuffa, who only wants you to fight the guys that are in your Zuffa Boxing stable? So while you can, call all the big names all you want,
you ain't going to get them.
It's not happening.
You're not getting them.
And Berlanga did that. Several fighters under the Zuffa banner lately have done that. Hello? What are you thinking? Unless Dana's business model is changing out of necessity, having to bend to deal with the bigger names who have traditional sanctioning organization titles, which, whatever these guys say, you know what? They all still want it. The Zuffa boxing belt is not going to be enough. And they know darn well that long before Dana is able to take over boxing, if that's really going to happen, they're going to be done and out of the sport. Their careers are going to end before that. How many votes will they get for the Hall of Fame if they spent their whole career, or at least their prime career years, fighting for Zuffa? I think this is dawning on a lot of them, and there's going to be some serious discussions. And I'll tell you, I think Hitchins is one of the first guys that's going to chafe, because did you notice that Hitchins, along with Berlanga, by the way, they were not wearing the Zuffa issued uniform trunks. Hitchins had his own custom trunks. Yes, he did, even with Zuffa. And so did Berlanga. So they're clearly bending their rules for certain name fighters. You know what? Because they have to. And they're businessmen, bottom line.
Think before you make moves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because they put a lot of that showy money in your face, long term, is it worth it? That's what Gail is kind of alluding to, in a sense, right? We see that you mentioned Berlanga. The first name that pops in my mind is Jaio Pataya, right? Cruiserweight champion. People thought Pataya was in a better position when he had the cruiserweight title, and people thought of him as the boogeyman in the division. He was in that better position then with Matchroom than he currently is now, because what he's doing. He doesn't have a title. Yes, he's getting in the ring, and yes, he maybe get paid, but for what? To the point now that he's suing he wants to file suit against the IBF. Well, sir, you should have thought about that before you signed with Zuffa. You should know what you're getting into before you sign. Same thing with Hitchins. Okay, with Matchroom, at least he had a belt. At least, and with that belt comes cachet and the opportunity to get fights. You don't have that now. He's calling out these names. Doesn't mean they're going to fight him. Why? Because he's not really a cash cow. At least with the belt at 140, he would have had a bargaining chip. He doesn't have it now, and that's the situation that he is. He's kind of stuck. He's on an island by himself. He doesn't look like he has any dance partner anytime soon.
That is true. Although we will admit, Dana White in the post-fight press conference did allude to the fact that he knows he's probably had to start letting his guys fight outside.
Let me add. Notice. Do you think that Dana White is going to do for Hitchins what he did with Conor Ben when it comes to making that fight with Garcia? No. Why? Because Conor Ben, whatever you want to think of him, he is a cash cow, particularly over in the UK. Hitchins is not that here in the United States.
That was the caveat I was about to say. He did say he was had willing to have his stable fight people outside of Zuffa, but he said it's going to be on a case by case basis, which means that you have to really, really make it worth it in order for Dana to let you out of the playpen. We're gonna have to see how long until Hitchins comes to regret the signing.
Indeed. Last fight I want to talk about one going back to you on this one, Daniel. We talked about Edgar Berlanga and Stephen Butler, right? Gail alluded to the fact that Butler's only real chance in this contest would be power because he can punch. He put Berlanga on the deck in round two, but still, exciting fight. But the thing that we all agreed on was the fact that Butler doesn't have a chin, and that showed in this fight where Berlanga just basically overwhelmed him with power and whatnot. Entertaining contest, but just like Richardson Hitchins, Daniel, I'm like in reaction to Berlanga's win. So what? What did you really prove here, beating a guy you should have beat, who can't take a who has a weak beard? You This doesn't mean that you people think of you any better when it comes to the division at 168. Um, right. So
Yep.
even he wants Shiraz. Shiraz is going to beat him again if they fought. If they fight 10 times, Shiraz is going to beat him at least 9 of those times. I don't see Berlanga beating anybody, beating Pacheco or any of the champions at 168. If Adamez is moving up from 160, he beat him at 168. Alam Kamuli, if he moves up to 168, he will beat him as well. So while Berlanga, in many ways to me, he is a figment of his own imagination in terms of how good he thinks he is, what a hype train that he thinks he is, what a moneymaker that he thinks he is. Um, Against world class competition, he ain't it. And that fight with Butler doesn't mean that he's all of a sudden a world level fighter. And miss me with the fight with Canelo. That just speaks to me how Canelo has fallen off. There's no indication of how Edgar Berlanga is really good because he ain't that good.
Yeah, that's the sad part of it. That's the sad part of when it comes to Fire Berlanga now. Obviously, like I said, they fought in New York City. It's supposed to be Berlanga's base, but here's the main thing when it comes into Puerto Rican fighters. Unfortunately, the fan base has already, for the most part, moved on, except for the people that rode with Berlanga from the beginning. Because when they realize, okay, Berlanga, you're not the next Tito, their search continues, and now they're either going to
Or Kodo.
or Kodo in that manner. They're looking so much Kodo. Tito, it tends to be like the white whale when it comes to this area of the country, as far as Puerto Rico's fighter what to do. But that's the thing. This fight did not do anything to move that needle. Yes, Berlanga got knocked down in the second round. And yes, he was able to power his way and win against a Butler who, unfortunately, does. I wouldn't say he has the Amir Khan candy chin, but it's probably just a tier below, which is not a compliment, folks. So all this really does is, okay, it kind of just shows, all right, he can get some people in New York City to come by. He's probably not going to do that the same thing if they try to put fight in Philadelphia or in Orlando, like two of the other mainly hot spots for Puerto Ricans in the country. The unfortunately layout of this is, again, that because we mentioned, like, be careful who you sign with. It goes both for the fighters and the promoters. Fights like this with Hitchins and fights like this with Berlanga are warning sign to Dana White, just trying to sign names for the sake of signing names to try to show that you're a big shot in this sport. Sometimes you overpay and sometimes you wind up getting a product that has way overinflated its value, and that's probably the case now with Berlanga at this stage because 168, 168, he for the champions, he's food. He's food. And unfortunately, he's too big probably to even try to attempt 160. And at 175, that's even worse. That's even worse. So what are you gonna? What do you win? What do you win by this? Nothing except for the fact that okay, you got a decent paycheck, and now Dana White's probably growing semi even bolder now.
I have no more to add. Let's move on to some news here, uh, um, Gail. And today was supposed to be the purse bid for uh, Devin Haney and Keyshawn Davis, who's been elevated to Haney's mandatory at 147 pounds. Two questions here. And well, let me say, in concert with that, Haney has signed a deal with Matchroom. Reaction to Haney agreeing with Matchroom when there was some rumblings that he could sign with Zuffa, and that's one. Two, will Haney and Davis eventually hammer out a deal? Because I'm still a little bit skeptical if that fight happens.
I do think they will come to an arrangement. It's a good fight. It's the right one. It falls into place nicely. I think that the Haneys, and make no mistake, that was a decision made by both Bill and Devin together. They've always been very competent free agents, essentially, even when they've worked with promoters. And while perhaps they didn't think that the Matchroom contract, their prior contract, was the perfect fit, it was certainly a better fit for them than anything else out there. If they want to temporarily, at least for a couple of fights, hand over a little bit of the business side of the arrangement to Eddie, I think they at least trust him to do the right thing. They're all interested in making good fights for good money. So their interests align at this point. And when you're getting into purse bids, things like that, sometimes it's like, can you do your own taxes? Yeah. Would you rather hand it over to a good, solid CPA who knows what they're doing and pay them a little money to make sure it's absolutely done right so you max it out? Yes. And I think this is a very similar arrangement. And purse bid, now that it's been put off for a few days, what that tells me is that there are productive talks underway. And the sanctioning organizations, they do not like to force a purse bid if they think the parties can get the job done on their own, because the money tends to be better if they negotiate it themselves. When it's a purse bid, then it becomes the, Price is Right. Everybody trying to strategize, what's the absolute amount of money I need to bid and not lose it. And they all start playing games with each other that race, to the bottom. And they don't want to do that. So no, I do think we see it. People need to stop calling out Tank Davis. Let's just veer off in that direction. We heard a lot of that this weekend from various parties. Tank Davis is not available. Tank Davis has enormous legal problems and other problems in his life. We have no idea whether he's coming back to boxing. We have no idea what division he's coming back to. He may come back, but you cannot sit around and wait for Tank Davis. You need to make your plans and move on. So the Haneys are smart enough, regardless of whether they really love that fight or not, and I'm sure they would, they're not going to sit on the sidelines and wait. They don't want to hand their destiny to somebody else who's, frankly, that flaky at this point. He is not reliable in any way. And that is not how the Haneys operate.
Yeah, indeed. I have nothing to agree with that. I have nothing to add to that. You're absolutely right. And I agree, I should say, with everything you just said. I want both of you to discuss input, reaction to this next. It's not even a news segment here, but I put it in here for a reason. And at least in my timeline, I'll say this, right? In my algorithms on social media, um, there was a good amount of talk about a Japanese fighter by the name of Tsutsumi, Reito Tsutsumi, who fought on the undercard of Joshua and Prenga, scored a highly impressive stoppage win over a previously undefeated Mexican fighter by the name of Mesa Wright. Um, the broadcast team over on the Zone was impressed, and when I watch him, Mesa was no slouch, was no bum at all, and Tsutsumi ran through him. Turkey Al Sheik has decided to spotlight him, Gail and Daniel, and I'm seeing some buzz created about the kid. Japan has been on fire in terms of boxing overall, in terms of prospects, in particular. Naoya Inoue is on record saying that Japan has the best fighters in the world, quote unquote. I understand why the development over in Japan, um, par excellence, fighters rise up through the ranks quickly, and the way they're trained, they're often substance. Um, the difference with Tatsumi, I'd say, Gail and Daniel, when you see other Japanese fighters, prospects, they usually stay at home, right? They usually fight at home. Tatsumi is different in that they're bringing him, they're making him an international. Uh, uh, they're making him fight more international stages outside of Japan. I think that says something about him. Um, and when you look at the fight he's fighting at 130, there's an opportunity to move up further in the ranks. If this kid was, say, at 22 and below, when those divisions are deeper, Gail and Daniel, let's say 22, 18, 15, 12, 8, 5, I would I would be more cautious. But let's face it, 130 is not the deepest division outside of Navarrete, outside of Shock Foster. What is really there in terms of really, really good fighters, even really, really good contender? I guess I'm saying all this to say, one, the kid has some serious talent, and B, he's fighting in a division where you can see him make some serious moves. Your thoughts on what you saw for Tatsumi over the weekend in terms of how he's being advanced, particularly by Turkey Alex Sheik and others.
Well, I think you pinpointed part of the reason is he is at 130 and a young fighter who you would anticipate might be moving up. So he's in a much more visible, division than he would be if he was at 108, 112, 115. A lot of the Japanese fighters, especially early in their careers, start in very low weight divisions, and it is difficult to get eyes on them in those extreme lower weight divisions until they move up or until they're just so undeniable. They're a Naoya Inoue or a Bam Rodriguez that they can't be denied. So
And the
Sutsumi,
competition is deeper.
the
Japan is
competition's
loaded in
deeper.
those divisions. Good
Right.
gosh.
Well, the eyeballs are going to be on these divisions because now you start entering divisions where there's international competition that does get attention in a way those smaller ones do not, except at the top level. He has an outstanding amateur background. Everybody had their eyeballs on him. He's being trained by Ishmael Salas. I mean, this guy is destined for international exposure. He is very ambitious. He wanted to step his way up to a 10-round fight right away. This is his fifth fight. His fifth fight. That's the kind of thing we saw from guys like Vasily Lomachenko, right? Andy Cruz. This is the kind of guy with the kind of ambitions we've got here. And he's already been snapped up and being paid as a Ring Magazine ambassador, whatever the heck that means. But a lot of very big names are being paid as Ring Magazine ambassadors. So people like what they see. They like his upside. He got himself a absolutely dominant victory. He was taking on a Mexican fighter who was undefeated. Just ran through him. He never allowed Hamazah to get settled at all. It only took him 2 rounds. So, he hands the Mexican kid, his first defeat. He barely broke a sweat to do it. He's got that hand speed. He's got that accuracy. We all who love the lower weight divisions for the excitement and speed they bring are thrilled to see this guy. And I hope he lives up to all these expectations.
I'm glad you mentioned Andy Cruz. I forgot to mention him because Cruz is going back down to 130. So there's another fighter to put in the mix. But outside of that, let's just say that Shot Foster lives up to his word and says this is going to be his last fight in the division. That's a belt there. Let's just say that Navarrete decides he wants to move back up to 135. Those are 2 belts there. I'm just saying, as I said earlier, there are opportunities there, and expect him to be in the rankings very soon. If not at 130, at 126. Either way, you can see the seeds being planted by his handlers to put him in position to make some significant moves here in the next 6 months, year, 18 months.
Yeah, and one of the things that at least jumped out to me was that he was being trained by Ishmael Salas. That already shows that you're willing to step outside the normal Japanese circle of trainers who, like I said, they're very, very good trainers. They perform very, very well. But now you're willing to step out. Somebody like Salas who's going to give you training when it comes to fighters outside of Japan. And yeah, this kid does have the goods. And luckily, he is in a prime division where the paths are there for him to get a championship. Obviously, we mentioned he does have Turkey's backing. That speaks volumes right now. And we'll see how it goes, because the main thing, luckily, I think, is people are starting to realize, and we know we did some hiccups from the Superfly series, that if you really, really want people to pay attention to these lower weight classes, or getting close to those lower weight classes, anything from 140 on down, from an international stage, you need to highlight these guys early. You can't wait for it to become later on in their career, so when they're fully established in that area. That's unfortunately what happened with Gallo and Chocolatito, and those were the really small weight classes. So they're getting smart and trying to put him up front early. I would not be surprised by this time next year he has a belt.
Honestly, I wouldn't be either. Given the division and in the direction they're trying to take him. Let's move on to some fights here that's going to take place this upcoming weekend, particularly on the 1st in Las Vegas, on another DAZN TNT collaboration. You got Raymond Muratalla, Gail, coming off of the win against Andy Cruz in his last bout. I was very, very impressed by that. He returns to the ring defending that IBF lightweight title against Robson Conceicao. Here's my thing. Conceicao is a good fighter, right? He's a beef fighter. He's fighting a guy in Muratalla who's B plus. At his best, possibly A minus. The Muratalla that we saw against Cruz beats Conceicao in my opinion. I'm not saying Conceicao won't be competitive; he will, but Muratalla, he's just a better fighter overall.
No question. No question about it. But there are some practicalities here. This is not the main event. Saturday, the main event is a really terrific fight. I think that we'll finally get some entertainment worth sitting down for between Lamont Roach and William Zepeda, but we'll get there in a second. Muratalla and Conceicao are the co-main event. You know, this is a completely golden boy financed card with a little bit of PBC money because you got, some guys there. There's no Saudi money involved. So you only have enough to pay your guys on the card so much. So they're not going to be able to pay an extremely high quality opponent for Muratalla, much beyond somebody like Conceicao, who has a very good name, who will give him a good scrap, a good effort. He will absolutely earn his pay. They will keep Muratalla busy. They will give him another title defense. They'll give him a fight in Vegas. They'll get him in front of some more fans. And that will serve the purpose for this week to get him to that next fight where they can place him on some kind of ring card, or he does become the main event in maybe a smaller venue. This week at this time, August 1st, it's going to be 112 degrees in Las Vegas, and I'm going to feel it in a couple of days. I mean, that's the best they can do, and I'm not mad at it. I would rather see these guys stay busy. How many times have we had this discussion? So I applaud it. I will be very happy to see Muratalla in person. Hopefully there'll be some people. It is at a small venue. If you're anywhere near the Las Vegas area and you get there, he's not going to be performing at T-Mobile or the MGM or Mandalay Bay. This is being held at the Virgin Hotels, which used to be the old Hard Rock Hotel. And some of you listening have certainly attended a fight at the Hard Rocks Theater. So I think it's a shade under 4,000 people. You're going to be right on top of that ring. I mean, I am not being paid by Golden Boy or anybody to sell this fight, but I'm telling you, if you don't go very often, but you have the opportunity and this fits your budget, I mean, you could do a hell of a lot worse than go attend this card. And it is not a pay-per-view, so you'll be able to watch it on DAZN should you choose to and have the subscription.
I mean, this fight versus the undercard bouts that we saw in Saudi Arabia last week, what do you want?
Right?
What do you want?
I mean, really, this is a damn good little card. Are there big names? Are there flashy trash talkers? No, they are not. Are you going to get solid effort and good entertainment? Yes, you are. And honestly, these are the kind of cards I personally prefer.
And a champion who decides to stay active, keep his name out there, and it happening on cable television. What a novel concept in 2026. Just saying. How they used to do it. How they used to do it. Take note, folks. On the main event, Daniel, is and Gail alluded to this. Lamont Roach, William Zepeda fighting for the vacant WBC lightweight title. That title was vacated by Shakur Stevenson earlier this year. I agree with Gail in thinking this is going to be a heck of a fight. Don't judge Zepeda by what we saw against Shakur. Shakur is one of the best fighters in the sport. Shakur is elite. That Zepeda can beat anybody else at 135 pounds, right?
Yep.
Including a Muratalla who's fighting on the undercard. Roach coming off of I still feel a win over Tank, the fight against Pitbull Cruz, right? He's right in there in the mix in that 130, 35 pound landscape. I don't think I I wonder if he is as good as he looked against Tank. I think a lot of that had to do with Tank, but still highly competitive bout that should be entertaining. Roach, he's skilled, but he doesn't move. Zapata likes to march forward. I think he has a little bit more skill than he gets credit for. Overall, this should ultimately, I think this should be it has all the makings of being a very competitive bout. You can't uh, say, oh, this guy is going to win, no doubt about it. No, 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 no. This is close to 50-50, 60-40 fight going either way.
Oh yeah. Oh no, this is a fight that you want to see. This is probably one of the fights that we should have gotten last week to actually give us a little bit more of, let's say, a helping serving in the buffet rather than one of the things that we got. Because this is a fight between, okay, yes, both of these guys are technically not coming off wins. Zapata is still coming off that loss to Shakur, and I agree. Zapata did hold his own against Shakur, but Shakur was that much better technically, and that version of Zapata would have beaten anybody else in that division that night. And Roach is coming off 2 draws. And you can make the argument that those should have been wins. So you have 2 guys that are coming in very, very hungry, want to prove people wrong. And when they do get it on, it's going to be a really, really fun fight. Like I said, this isn't a fight where you're going to say immediately, oh, yeah, this guy's going to flat out win. No. Roach is skilled enough where he can give Zapata problems, but Zapata is a machine at times. Once he gets going, it is very hard to stop him. So if that's the case, you have a real situation where the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object as far as momentum. You're going to have a very, very, very fun fight. And hopefully you're going to be entertained in this entire card. I completely agree. I completely agree with Gail. This card is actually one of the things that Golden Boy does really, really well. They do these type of cards almost all the time when it comes to their club shows. Fights that are going to be entertaining, that are fun. And because, like I said, there's no Saudi money involved, you know, a lot of these guys are not just fighting for a paycheck, just for the money. They're fighting to step up. So, folks, you're going to be entertained. Not to mention, I think this is, if I'm correct, this is going to be one of the fights that's going to be in TNT too. It does.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm so glad
yeah.
you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
I mentioned it. This card is going to be on cable television, so a TNT design collaboration. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, folks,
you do not need a DAZN subscription. You get to watch this on linear television, and it is really important for all of you hardcore, which make up a lot of our audience. We know that. A lot of you have the DAZN subscription. Please turn over and watch it on TNT because we want to show them there is an audience for this on linear television. It is so important to expose people to the current fighters. You know, if the last person they watched in the ring was Floyd Mayweather, you know, we need to get them up to speed. That is also why you've got fighters who know how to entertain on this card, right? Can you imagine TNT having to watch Hamazah Sheeraz in the ring for 12 rounds? Oh my God. I mean, they might as well just, you know, shut the channel down. But you're going to see the main event, Roach Zapata, guaranteed good fight. Muratalla, Conceicao, they're not quite the power punchers, but they'll deliver. The third fight on the card is the very overlooked welterweight Raul Curiel, the Mexican Olympian, dynamite action fighter. He's fighting Quentin Randall. Should be a great time. Charles Conwell is on the card. Gail Cabrera, great prospect on the card. Joel Iriarte, another talented welterweight out of California, on the card. A lot of the opponents are Mexicans. I'm just saying. Um, it's going to be a good card all the way up and down, and that's what TNT needs to be putting on these Saturday night cards. And I don't think there's a whole lot of boxing competition this weekend like last weekend. So we want eyeballs on this, folks. Tell a friend, get them to tune in for a little bit. I think they'll be happy with what they see.
Indeed, I
Yep.
think we're going to end things on that note. I want to thank everybody who joined us. Shout out to Compliance for his comments and in the live chat. I'll go around the panel here. Begin the show with ladies first. End the show with ladies first, as always. Gail from nyfights.com and Gail Falkenthal on boxing. For those who want to talk about all things the sweet science, let them know where to hit you up.
Well, you can hear me talk about broccoli and fights and guys who are washed and all that stuff on social media under my name, Gail Falkenthal. Interviews appear on my YouTube channel, Gail Falkenthal on boxing. And the columns, the previews, the recaps, I always give you a generous amount of video highlights from the fights at nyfights.com.
And go to you, Daniel, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you. You on mute, Daniel.
Oh, sorry. Yes, folks, Ruckus99 on Twitter. You see it all there. To be fair, yeah, Elon, never. It'll never be X. It'll never be X. It will always be Twitter. But pretty much every single social media platform, it's Ruckus99. And definitely catch me on there. And like I said, we're all gonna try to do some things. Luckily, getting closer to hopefully a very, very busy second half of the calendar when it comes to boxing. And folks, like I mentioned, like you can do the double whammy next weekend. You can have it. You can have the fight on TNT on the TV, and if you want, you can have it on the zone on the laptop. More views, the better.
Absolutely. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, and smell good, you know what it is for me. On Twitter, because like Daniel, I refuse to call it X. Check me out there, Brother JR at Brother JRSC. You can also check me out on IG and Blue Sky, Brother JR. Brother JR76 on Twitter, Brother JRSC on IG and Blue Sky. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the fight between Lamont Roach and Williams and Peta again. That's going to be for the vacant WBC belt at 135 on the undercard. Raymond Muratalla making second defense, I believe, of the IBF 135-pound title against Robson, Conceicao. And also a preview. What I think is going to be an outstanding women's fight is going to take place on the 8th in Orlando on ESPN. Sherneka Johnson fighting Nino Thorsland for Johnson's undisputed bantamweight title on the undercard there. Leslie Robinson fighting Thibodeau. Robinson defending her unified belts at 160 pounds. Former 115-pound champion, I believe she was. Sharita Metcalf is going to be fighting on that card as well. So again, thank everybody who joined us in the live chat on YouTube. Excuse me. If you have not done so, make sure you hit that like button. Also, make sure you subscribe. That way, you'll get notifications for all future episodes and any upcoming shorts. This has been episode 494 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report for Gail Falkenthal on boxing, which you can find here on YouTube as well, and in nyfights.com. For Daniel for boxing news and the Inscriber. I'm your host, Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.